Is Iuno going to be better than Jiyan as a main DPS potentially? Hear me out on this. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. Okay, I want to clarify something before we start. I've been getting a lot of comments thinking that I'm like a really big Iuno fan. That's not actually the case. I don't care about her that much. I'm not even pulling her on main. She looks nice, I'm just not that interested in her. Essentially, there's just not really that much to cover leading up to 2.7, so I just thought that I might as well talk about the new character that's coming up, since I feel like that's more productive content, and I've been waking up really early in the morning, so I just kind of have a lot of time to make videos, so I'm just like, okay, well, let's just make something on Iuno. So hopefully that clears that up. I'm not like the biggest Iuno fan ever or anything like that. I just thought that was kind of funny, but essentially I just thought I would try out making more content on the new character because I felt like that might be useful and it might be interesting. So hopefully that clears that up. But anyways, into the video. Okay, so it sounds like a bit of a stupid theory because up until this point I've been saying that Iuno is going to be a great support for Jiyan. She's likely going to be his new best in slot. Yes, that's still true. That is indeed still true. I still do believe that Iuno is going to be an amazing teammate for Jiyan, and she's seriously going to boost up his performance meta-wise, and definitely gonna help his damage, and at the very least, be a good side grade to Shakona Air Rover for him. However, I had a bit of a silly idea. The thing is, Iuno's gonna be able to play as a main DPS. It's not her intended playstyle, but it's one that's certainly going to be viable. She's supposed to be the 5-star upgrade to Mortefi, being a good heavy attack damage dealer buffer, and she was mostly intended to be Augusta's best in slot teammate because of her unique ability to provide characters that generate their own shields, damage amplification. So, why do I think that she might be a better main DPS than Jiyan? Especially because DPS Iuno sounds more like a gimmick. Well, I've been thinking, how much of a gimmick is it actually going to be? Because think about it like this, DPS Brand is an actually competent team now. After we got Lupa, that is a genuine thing that people could pull Brant for, to play him as a main DPS. Before it was kind of copium, to be honest, because you would only really use that just for the fun of it, and you would use Sanhua as the second salt teammate because you didn't really have any better options. But then we got Lupa, and all of a sudden, playing Brant as a main hyper carry actually kind of became a genuinely viable option. It was viable before, I feel like I'm underselling it a bit. It was usable, you could clear T away with it. It was nothing that bad. However, now it's more so something that you could actually use and see some genuinely good, impressive performance out of, especially if you have a well-built Brand, provided you have his signature weapon. And I actually think that this logic is going to apply to Iuno as well. What I mean by this is that I think that with her signature weapon, if you have her at her highest possible damage potential, she might potentially end up being a better carry than Jiyan. You might think I'm a little bit off my rocker here, but hear me out. Essentially, Jiyan's a 1.0 DPS. His hypercarry numbers are starting to fade a little bit. In fact, I would say that he's already one of the lower tier DPSs. I still love the guy, I still do clear with him, he's one of my mains, I really like him. However, it's undeniable that his damage is not that impressive anymore, and because Whimpering Wastes had such high HP inflation, he's not really the behemoth that he once used to be there whenever the mode first came out, because now they want you to have high damage on top of mobbing. So, Jiyan's in a bit of a rough position right now. He's not bad, of course, but he's definitely not the prime pick for a main DPS. Because of that, consider this. Most 2.x units have had very high damage, and honestly, so too have the second slot teammates. Even Shakona, who's obviously not a DPS and is definitely one of the least DPSable of the 2.x second slot teammates, even she does some damage in her main rotation. So with that in mind, it makes me think. I unironically think that Iuno on her own, with her signature weapon, could end up being a better main DPS than Jiyan. It sounds a little silly, but I genuinely think it's plausible, especially if Changli Quickswap is a thing that's going to be viable with her. At that stage, I do just think it is going to happen, because Quickswap raises the ceiling so high, and there is so much room for skill expression and abusing cooldowns there. However, even if you play her normally with Yinlin or Shakona, I still think that that's going to end up working out quite nicely. Not to mention, but I think that she's going to have a free-to-play friendly DPSing team. I say free-to-play friendly, but you do kind of have to be a bit lucky to get it because you have to lose your 50/50s to quite a specific standard character, that being Jiyan. If you get an S2 Jiyan and Arrow Rover, well then you've got yourself a free-to-play DPS Iuno team. And even that is likely to be at the very least on par with Jiyan in my opinion, because I feel like her damage numbers, we don't know them yet, we have to actually test her out, but I still can't shake the feeling that I think she's going to be a bit more of an impressive DPS than I've been giving her credit for recently. Now, do I think that she's going to be reaching the levels of Augusta, so to speak? Not necessarily. Augusta's a very strong DPS, so that's kind of putting the bar quite high in my opinion, but even so, I do think that she's at the very least going to be able to compete with Jiyan's own damage. So, what does this mean for the poor guy? Well, if you're a Jiyan main, I do still think that Iuno is going to be a good pull for you. Don't be put off by this. You can still pair them together likely, and it's still going to be stronger than whatever you were using before. I do think it's going to end up being better than Shikona possibly if you have a Iuno signature weapon, because I do think that personal damage is going to help out. However, I think the out-damaging is only really going to happen if you play Iuno as a dedicated main carry, and you have a second salt teammate that's giving your liberation damage buffing. And the reason I say that is because I know that maybe you wouldn't really want your support to out-damage your main carry if you really want your main carry to be the one doing the carrying, which is completely understandable. You want your main guy to be the star of the show. However, if you're interested in just pulling for a first DPS, I'm actually not too sure if a Iuno would even be a bad option. I don't really think I would recommend her over somebody who's more of a dedicated main DPS, but I'm only really seeing more and more positive qualities of her pop up over time. I have said in the past that, you know, she's a bit more on the niche side, you don't really need her, and if you're a free-to-play, it's a bit harder to justify the investment into her, and that if you have more Teffy, you're generally gonna be fine. But I feel like she's honestly gonna end up being quite a good jack-of-all-trades character. Not only do I think that she has the potential to at least be on par with Jiyan, because consider how Brandt is a genuinely good DPS now. Like, he is an actually strong fusion main DPS if you want to play him that way, provided that you have Lupa. I don't see why the same thing's not gonna happen with a Iuno, and maybe I'm severely overestimating her, because Brandt does have that big wuthering nuke after all, but even so, I feel like she's going to be quite strong because of this. And I could be having way too much faith in her, considering that not every second slot teammate has been super DPS friendly. They've all done damage to some extent, but they're not all DPS friendly. I wouldn't say that Cantarella's that DPS friendly, for example. I would say that Shikona's not really that DPS friendly. It's a thing you can do, it's just not really that good. Whereas with Brandt, if you invest into it, it's actually good. And I think Iuno's gonna be a similar case here. And the reason why I feel like this is important to mention is because previously, I kind of said that, okay, I think this is going to be more of a meme team, and I don't think this is anything that anybody's going to take seriously, but I do think that it actually might have some value in being taken seriously. Now granted, if you have a bunch of team options, because you already have a ton of DPSs, though considering that we're getting new tower floors, having more teams isn't necessarily a bad thing in my opinion, because I feel like over time, you're going to want more teams, and the nice thing is that they're very gradually adding in these extra teams, so that's pretty cool. But either way, I'm starting to think that Iuno's going to be a bit more of a valuable pull than I initially expected for certain types of people. I do want to emphasize that. Certain types of people. Like, if you have literally no main DPSs on your account, but you happen to have a Yinlin lying around with a String Master equipped, well then there you go, Iuno's actually going to end up being quite a banger pull for you. Or if you have a Shikona that's not really doing much for you, well then I don't really know why you would have pulled for Shikona because she's quite a niche unit, but whatever, you get the idea. You've got something to do with her now. Did you land upon an S2 Jiyan Shin that you don't really have much you can do with? Once again, now there is something you can do with her. So, even though it's a bit strange sounding, I do think that she's actually going to end up being a little bit stronger than anticipated as a main DPS. I'm not particularly sure, but it could end up being the case. Now obviously, pulling a support to be a main DPS is a decision of all time, and I know that most people are not going to be using her like that, but the reason I do still feel like this stuff is important to mention is A, because it's actually good, therefore it's an actual consideration in regards to your meta value, and B, because of that, I know that there's going to be a lot of simps who are really interested in this character but want to make her an on-fielder because they just personally love the character a lot. That is a big subsection of people for multiple characters. Obviously, it doesn't happen every time, but I do feel like every character has their dedicated fanbase that wants to see them on field the majority of the time. I know that I myself am going for an S6 Choyuan because regardless of whatever his kit ends up being, I want to see him on field as much as humanly possible. So, there are people that this information is relevant to. And second of all, This could change your opinion on pulling for her or not, if you previously were going to, or if you previously weren't going to, because this could be something that you either like, or you dislike. You see, here's the thing, Brant ended up being quite a strong DPS, and I do think that if Iuno, who's slotted to be a second salt teammate for Augusta, is gonna be anything like that, then I think we could be looking at another funny situation where we end up having a second salt teammate that genuinely isn't half bad as a main DPS. And not even just not half bad, but not a ridiculously niche option, and an actually decent one. I'm not really sure how she's gonna perform in Whimpering Wastes, we'll have to see. But yeah, what do you think about all this? Hopefully this video was able to tell you why Iuno might end up being better than Jiyan, and why I think that she's a bit more of a viable main DPS than we might have initially thought. This has been Juice, signing out, and I can't wait to see all the nukes that people are gonna do with her whenever she releases.